Here are the top 3 best opening traps for Blitz and Bullet to catch your opponents off guard this year. In the first one, we start off with the move knight to f3, taking away this square, therefore pushing your opponent to move the other pawn forward, and then you play pawn e4. And no, that's not the intercontinental ballistic missile, that's another one. e4, you bait your opponent to capture this pawn, and after that you play knight take e5. Quite a provocative move, because good things come to those who bait. Now, your opponent is annoyed by this knight, and quite often they will play f6. Crazily enough, even 2800 rated players play this move in Blitz, but that is already a losing mistake, because after queen to h5, all of a sudden, it's basically game over. Now, black has to cover with this pawn, but then you sack the knight right here, and black is losing this rook inevitably, either to your knight, or if they capture, they lose it to your queen. Moreover, not only you won material, but you also attack the knight, you destroy the shield of their king, and you keep attacking. Now, in most cases, they're going to move the knight away, because it's in danger, they are going to play knight h6, and then you can follow up with one more little trap, pawn to d3. It looks like you just offer your opponent an exchange, and quite often they will capture, overlooking the fact that there is a sniper bishop right here on c1, and you can grab the knight, and then it's total disaster for black. Even if they notice the final threat, it's already too late for black to change anything. Even if, let's say, they notice the threat, they move the knight away, you keep the queen right there to keep putting pressure all around, and let's say after they straight, you're threatening bishop takes g6, you put pressure all around, and it's easily winning. What if your opponent does not fall for the trap? Well, that's still playable. Let's say they go knight f6, then you just play pawn to d4, solidifying your knight on e5, and then you simply aim to develop your pieces, and you have some compensation for your sacrificed pawn because of your free development. If they take this pawn en passant, then what I recommend you to do is not recapture immediately. Of course, you could do this, but instead to play knight c3, baiting your opponent for the final time. And weirdly enough, in most cases, they do capture this pawn on c2 because they're used to you playing silly moves, giving up pawns here and there. And so they just capture this pawn, expecting you to retake with a queen, but instead, you change your mind and you take on d8, forcing the king to move. And now after knight takes f7, we still got to this rook on h8 thanks to the fork. If they don't fall for this trap and just continue their development, you do the same, you now recapture this pawn on d3, and yes, you're a pawn down, but that's not the end of the world. You have a little bit more space and freer development of your pieces. Say they go bishop d6, attacking this knight, you defend it. After this, you can play bishop g5, castle queenside, put in your rook to this open file. You have pinned his knight, and overall, I quite like your position here. The second trap is pretty cool as well. It occurs from these standard opening moves, and here you go for the Philidor defense. And don't worry if you don't play the Philidor defense normally. I mean, first of all, we're aiming for the very specific position, and even if it doesn't occur in your game, it's really simple. I mean, you just play trivial developing moves and life's good. But for the most part, they're going to play bishop c4, putting their bishop to the standard square, then you play knight f6, attacking this pawn, and here they come to realize that they can play knight g5, similar to the fried liver attack, and it looks like you're indeed in trouble. However, you have something prepared here. You play pawn d5, and after white recaptures with their pawn on d5, the position is actually very similar to the two knights game. You only don't have your knight right here on c6, it's still in their starting position, but actually it turns out to be quite good for you, because you don't have to waste time moving this knight around. Now, your knight is still here, therefore you do have time to do something. As we block the diagonal, they're not threatening your pawn anymore, and you can play h6, kicking this knight away. Your knight from f6 controls this square, therefore they're forced to go here, and now you keep pushing the knight away. Where can it go? I mean, it doesn't feel good to retreat back to the original square, therefore they're probably going to play either knight e5 or knight d4, and in both cases we have something prepared. In case of knight e5, there is a strange move queen e7, and all of a sudden this knight is virtually trapped, because thanks to our pawn we took away these two squares, and also it can't go to g4 because we've got our bishop and our knight controlling this square, therefore retreating their knight there would be just a blunder. So what can they do? They'll usually play d4, trying to support the knight, but then you plan this en passant capture, pawn takes d3, renewing the threat to the knight. They still feel like it's troublesome, also due to this pin, but they found the way. They castle here, hoping for you to take the knight, and what they hope to do is to play rook e1, which is going to pin your queen and win it. But you win thanks to the nice in-between move pawn takes c2. You don't really want to trade pawns, it's not for that primary purpose. The primary reason is just to deflect the queen off the square. After queen takes c2, which is forced, otherwise you're going to grab something, you then calmly capture this knight on e5, and you indeed grab material. There is no rook e1 anymore, the rook is undefended, you would simply capture it, and otherwise you're just up a piece. Now when we know that putting the white knight on e5 is actually dangerous, how about knight to d4? Then you also have an interesting sequence here. You play bishop c5, developing your bishop and gaining a tempo. After they go back and hit your bishop, you then retreat back to d6. And I actually like your position here. Yes, you sacrifice the pawn, but that pawn on d5 is doubled and it obstructs the bishop on c4, so it's not very helpful for white anyway. And you have a nice position. You have these long diagonals for your bishops, you're ready to castle, you have more space thanks to this pawn, so you have full compensation and it's a great position to play. Moreover, the most natural move for white to play here, castling kingside, would be a blunder, because you play bishop takes h2, the Greek gift sacrifice. Now after they capture it, there is knight to g4, check to the king must move, if it goes back then you follow up with queen h4, threatening mate. It's a standard sequence and it's worth remembering because it works across various different openings. Now the only way for them to avoid an immediate checkmate would be to play rook e1, trying to provide this escape square, but then the rook no longer guards the pawn on f2 and you can change your mind and first grab the pawn right here. After this you return back and you keep checking the king all the way till the end and it's a checkmate. The next one is pretty cool because you can counter-trap your opponent. This one works out against the popular Stafford Gambit, and the Stafford Gambit itself is a pretty dangerous opening weapon indeed, where black sack this pawn on a5, but then they play knight c6, challenging your knight, and after this trade, they opened up diagonals for their bishops, they take this lead in development, and there are a ton of different traps here, literally at every step of the way. It's very dangerous for white to play it. So I always wanted to find something that could counter-trap those players who play the Stafford Gambit. And here's what I found. Let's take it one move back. After they played knight to c6, attacking your knight, I wanted to find something that would surprise your opponents, that would take them off guard, because those who do play this opening certainly know the main line really well. And so I came up with the move pawn f4, which is not known. And that's, by the way, the whole purpose of today's video. I wanted to share with you something that is not known by anybody from your opponents, because these are very rare variations or something new. So after f4, you defend this knight, therefore they gotta do something. You're up a pawn. They're likely to capture either this pawn on e5 or the knight on the e4, or the knight right there. And we're gonna take a look at these both options. What if they just take your pawn? Well, then you play queen e2, and not only you attack the knight, but indirectly you put your queen opposite to a king, which creates a lot of tactical motifs in the position. And it's really tricky for black to find the way out. Like 99% of your opponents won't be able to do that. Because what can they do? If let's say they take this knight on e5, that's straightforward losing error after queen takes e4. Now thanks to this pin, the knight can't move and you're going to capture it on the next move. They're going to be down a piece with no compensation. So that's pretty cool. If instead they want to guard this knight by playing pawn d5, it's pretty much the same thing. You want to capitalize on this pin, so you can trade knights first. Now we have this clear pin, and after d3 the knight can't run away and you're going to win it. It's also an easily winning position for white. Those who play the Stafford Gambit are attacking players, tactical players, and they may take a chance in this counterattack with queen h4 check. Now you cover with g3, but they take it because they realize that there's a pin, and after you take the knight, they grab the rook on h1. And at the moment, they indeed won the exchange, but there's one thing that they missed. Here, we still have got our queen opposite to their king, and after knight takes c6, that is actually not just to discover a check, but that is going to be literally a checkmate. They can cover, but that only delays things because we took away this square as well, so they can play something like bishop e7, queen takes, and it's literally a checkmate. That covers the natural move knight takes e4, and now we know that it is super tricky for black after that. Knight takes e5 is a better attempt, but after this, pawn takes, we attack the knight, they capture on e4, and you gotta play queen to f3. We need to be careful, because otherwise they can play queen h4 check to your king, and that is actually quite unpleasant. So queen f3 is the move, attacking the knight, and of course, if we ever need to put more pressure to the knight, we can always play knight c3 or d3, and we're gonna chase it away easily. Now, this time queen h4 is not useful for black, g3, and it's just all over, so that's not a good idea, and they gotta do something else. In most cases, they're gonna play knight g5, attacking your queen, so you move here to g3. Now, the knight is guarded, so you cannot capture it, and therefore black will now wish to develop somehow. The two most played moves by black are either bishop to c5 or pawn to d6, and against both of them we have one final trick. In fact, bishop c5, the most played move, is a straightforward blunder because of the move d4, which we're going to play anyway after virtually any move of black. And this time, here's the trick. Not only we attack the bishop, but we also opened up this diagonal for our bishop, creating the threat of bishop capturing the knight. And right now, because we attack two pieces simultaneously, they cannot save it. So after bishop takes d4, for example, bishop takes g5. It's a very common blunder for black here. we hit the queen and we're just up a piece. I mean, I can show you what could happen after that, but you don't have to remember it. Fundamentally, it's already winning. So let's say if they trade everything, queen take, you just play knight c3, you castle queenside, and it's easily winning. You're simply up a piece. And to those who say that opening traps is not the real way to get better at chess, I'm with you guys 100%, but at least you gotta be aware of those traps so that no one can use them against you. But still, chess is a strategic game, and if you want to hone your positional understanding, feel free to head to this free masterclass up there so that you improve your positional skills. Also, if you want to know the top 5 best openings for white with the highest win rate, check out this video.